Welcome to Cryptic Accounts, a podcast by paranoid people for paranoid people. I'm your host this week, Dennis Cheney, and on this episode, the second one of season 2, we have modern day dinosaurs. How you doing, Patrick? How you doing, Patrick Ryan?
A lot better now. So much better now.
Yeah, this one's not a bummer at all. This one's just pure.
We need that this week. Like, man, we dropped an episode a little too early last week.
Mm-hmm.
But luckily, nothing happened. There's nothing going on. There was no.
But we're just gonna get into pure dinosaur goodness. Hey, we're 165 days away from UFO disclosure, according to the COVID relief law.
Which, do you want to talk about this for a second? Because I think I've kind of. It's not for us. This is not for us. This is back to what we were talking about before. With the Space Force formation, with them basically trying to get information from the CIA, from the NRA, or NRO, sorry, not NRA. That's a whole different thing. But yeah, the National Reconnaissance Organization. Remember how they were like keeping all this information, and it seemed like at different points during history, different presidents have tried to do things to access that information.
Right, and we had called this back in the summer.
Yes.
That this was an attempt to get that info. And then in the COVID relief bill on the last day of the year, they made their go at it.
I mean, that's what I see is happening. I don't know that we're going to get anything really that new out of this, honestly. Like, we're going to get the same type of stuff we've been getting for the last 5 years, which is like sort of part of the story, but we're not going to tell you everything. But here's a little bit, kind of like the Nimitz encounters and stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And also I watched a documentary this past weekend that's like pretty new. You should check it out. It's for free a lot of places online. It's called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And we might want to do a show on it, but it's about these individuals who have been like developed what they call a close contact protocol. And basically the line now is that all this Nimitz stuff and even to the Stars Academy is more or less controlled opposition to, guess what, make us think that when they come they're going to be hostile. So that might fit into the whole blue beam thing.
Yeah, a lot of stuff's tying together a lot more closely than I think we were ever expecting when we started doing any of this.
Right.
Stuff.
So
the more research we do, the like, oh, well, that goes with that. That's weird. That backs that up. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm more stressed out.
If the disclosure is along the lines of what Tom DeLonge and the Nimitz stuff has been saying, it's going to be nothing but examples we pretty much already know about involving UFOs in like military bases. And then it's just going to be the narrative that we have to prepare to fight them. We got to build our Space Force. It's just all one big thing. And we would have no idea of knowing if that's necessarily true. So that's my take. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, all right. Enough UFOs, I guess.
I was just letting you make your point there.
Yeah, that's my point. Is I don't know. Now I'm paranoid. I was real big into to the Stars Academy and all that stuff and all that Rimmelsham Forest stuff. But the more I get into it, the more I think that whether they're good or bad, this idea that it's a national security threat seems concocted.
I mean, it seems a little late to be declaring them as some sort of national security thing when it's obviously been going on for close to 100 years. Like, if this was a real threat, I feel like we would have been reacting to it that way much sooner.
Especially if it's the kind of threat you can stop with guns, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, maybe it's demonic, maybe it's, something else. But if it's the type of threat where we need to build space planes, then they would have already done what they were going to do. It doesn't make any sense. Oh, and I'll tell you, so you ready to get into this, my man?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll tell you, as is our tradition, how I found this. And oddly, okay, so I've done a number of shows that have like hit on giants.
Mm-hmm.
And I have like accidentally become part of I don't know if I've told you this off air, but I have like accidentally become part of like a mailing list for academic papers about giants.
No,
Like,
but I want on that mailing list.
I
Why have
can
you
tell you,
not sent me a link? Why am I not on this mailing list?
I can tell you how to get on it, but it's actually pretty ridiculous. I'm getting like 2 or 3 different things a week.
There's that much giant news going on?
There's a lot of giant stuff. It's a lot of papers. It's a lot of, so it's actually, I'll just tell you right now, it's this website that I sometimes use for like secondary sourcing called Academia. I believe
Okay.
academia.org, and they have different college papers people have written at different levels. So you can kind of use it to find a bunch of sources and stuff. Okay, so you have to request it though. They have to give you the paper. So one time I requested a giant paper from there, and then it's just become a flood of papers about giants. So I sometimes click through them. I think, we'll do giant stuff in the future, but I'm a bit gianted out. So I was clicking through one earlier this week.
I've just had enough of humongous people for the time being. That's all I can do right now. I've had it up to here with huge people.
I've had it up to here with giants. That's hilarious. But I was clicking through one, and this dude wrote this giant paper called "The Epochs of the Earth Epochs." And it was interesting, and it had a lot of I'll probably use it to branch off on a lot of different topics, but it had a topic that I barely think about outside of like creationism, and that is modern day dinosaurs. And I found it super interesting, actually, and somewhat convincing.
That does not surprise me that you found that super interesting.
What little kid doesn't love dinosaurs?
I mean,
and if anything,
I'm very excited with whatever you're about to do here. Like, I feel like this may be an episode that doesn't depress me.
I don't think it will.
Or stress me out.
I mean, there's obviously the conspiracy that like they don't want us to know about dinosaurs, but beyond that, it's just kind of fun. And I think we all need that right now.
I think we do too.
So
take me to the magical world of dinosaurs, Dennis.
All right, let us begin. So throughout modern archaeology, Patrick, there has been numerous representations of large reptilian figures throughout legends, stories, pictographs, petroglyphs, and figurines made by cultures around the world. Many of these appear to match our current scientific knowledge from the fossil record of the anatomy of what we call dinosaurs. In his work, The Earth Epics, John Jensen of the Governors State University compiles evidence that dinosaurs not only survived the supposed extinction 65 million years ago, but coexisted with humanity across the early and late Holocene era. And the Holocene era is the end of the Ice Age to today. It's the era we're in. And it started about I believe 10,000 BC, about 11,500 years ago.
Okay.
So science obviously says that dinosaurs until 65 million years ago existed until about 65 million years ago, when a 6-mile across asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. And that's just a primer for all you who never saw a movie. But throughout human civilization, artists have created carvings, cave paintings, and other pictographs of animals that were part of their everyday life. And this reminded me of, if you recall, the giant, quote, Sistine Chapel of rock wall paintings. Did we discuss that on the show?
Was that the 6 mile or however long it was down in South America?
Yeah, I'll give a primer.
That they just found like a month ago or something?
So that was actually discovered in the Amazonian rainforest last year, which I believe was late 2019.
We didn't hear about it for a year? That was weird that it popped up at the end of 2020.
Well, there's been some complications. So just a primer on what it is. It's 12,500 years old. So it's from the very beginning of the Holocene era.
Okay.
And it actually stretches 8 miles in Colombia of these rock walls. So these paintings contain numerous now extinct Ice Age animals, such as mastodon, giant sloths, which are terrifying, and Ice Age horses.
These big things that move super slow with humongous claws.
Yeah, I would imagine that when they're big, they move faster because they would like.
I mean, they would stretch farther, but they're not actually moving any faster. Sloths to me just seem like food for like whatever environment they're in. I don't.
It's something about their hooks for hands that bothers me. I know that they're probably harmless, but it freaks
They're
me
like
out.
the most docile Wolverine ever.
Also, they move so slow that it's like, I know you got a trick up your sleeve. How are you surviving? Like, I know if we shut off these
That's my
lights,
ultimate question. Like we see them, and I don't hear anybody asking like, how have these things made it this far?
just
How have they
climbing,
not
I
all been
guess.
eaten? What is their trick? You
I've
never hear
wondered
about the
that.
sloth. You're right. You know what? Now you got me worried about the claws.
They're coming for you. So, in an interview with this is what I found interesting about this big rock wall. So, in an interview with the Guardian that I found, the research actually said the researchers that behind the discovery said that they actually expect to find much more of this, and that they've quote just scratched the surface, which is nuts, seeing as how it's 8 miles long. They've actually been slowed down by COVID-19, which is why we haven't heard about it too much.
Okay.
So this recent discovery is a reminder to me, and I never think about this, of how different our Earth has been in pretty much a relatively short amount of time. So keep in mind, these are the first people to ever migrate to what today is the Amazon rainforest. And back then it had mammoths and sloths. There was no rainforest because we were coming out of an ice age. So at that time there was no rainforest. So in the beginning of those cultures, I think that's interesting that a
I mean,
relatively short amount of time ago.
that is weird to think of. I guess I just never really thought. You just kind of assume that's always kind of been that way there.
Nope. It was just like everywhere else during the ice age, and then it's slowly grown into a rainforest since. So
Weird.
those were caveman drawings, basically.
Okay.
So the Holocene, as I said, is the time following the ice age. So at that time, of the Amazon paintings. They would have been some of the first arrivals, probably people who crossed the land bridge. So now we have the fact that humans have told stories also of large reptilian creatures for thousands of years, and thus left behind a kind of recording of these animals. So the author of this book that we're basing this off of, we're getting back into his work. He mentions details that seem to be reoccurring throughout cultures such as stout legs, elongated necks, knobby heads, spiked tails, and plated backs, etc. But interestingly, outside of the stories, we also have thousands, and by thousands, really, this should read tens of thousands of pieces of visual record that the author suggests perhaps recent scientific discoveries might also back up this theory that we lived among dinosaurs. So it's at this point that I should mention there are lots of fakes on the record, but we'll mention them as they come up. However, those fakes have often been used as an excuse by skeptics to overlook what seems to be hundreds of real examples because it doesn't fit the normal scientific narrative. And this seems to be the theme whenever you talk about archaeology, whether it's like Egypt or like South America or just basically anywhere. If something doesn't fit the theme, then they'll grab onto the few fakes that exist pretty much everywhere. So let's go through some of these. You'll take a look at them. I'm sure we'll pop them up on the YouTube for people who aren't watching, but I'll give you the name of each picture for people who are listening who want to look this up on their own. And we're going to start with number one, the Green River pterosaur. And this is a pictograph found in Utah. It's known as the Black Dragon. And this is one of the most accessible for the public viewing. It's located just 12 miles west of the Green River in Utah. So take a look at this. At first, I was not super impressed. And this, we're going to get better here. But if you really look at it, it's obviously something with wings. And what really got me was the knob on its head. Because if you compare that to a picture of a pterosaur, they got the little knob on their head.
All right.
Oh, it'll get better. Okay. I see you're not.
I'm just looking at the I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. So like the middle part's the head.
It's hard to see. So there's the
legs,
head.
but then it's like a ripped wing, like as well. It looks like it's going on there. Like I see the left side wing. That looks like a wing there.
Well, this is like 10,000 years old. Like it's obviously it has beaks. It has the pterosaur knob on its head, and it's some sort of giant bird. That's like
I give it to you. I'll give it to you.
Okay, and that's a small one. So at this point, I start Googling this. I'm like, how do we know it's a pterosaur? Okay, this took me down my first rabbit hole to the first mass basically mass finding, and I believe this is part of the same thing. And they're called the Kachina Bridge dinosaurs in Utah. So check out this next one. This is a Native American petroglyph under the Kachina Bridge at the National Bridges Monument in Utah. And what's that look like to you, man?
I think it's brontosaurus. That's what I think it is. If I was gonna claim something, that's the big one with the long neck and the long tail, right?
Yeah. It's a long neck. It's a sauropod or a brachiosaur, brontosaurus, all those.
Yeah.
So this was found among, and when you look up this the Kachina Bridge, so you'll see that this was found basically among other animal drawings. So there's what's very clearly like a goat, for instance, ram type thing, and there's very clearly other animal ones, and this one is found among them. And so obviously when people found it, they're like, "Hey, that's a dinosaur, man. That looks like a brachiosaurus." The Smithsonian says this one is all kinds of fake. They say, but they admit, oddly enough, they admit this is a real drawing. Their explanation, they admit this was drawn by ancient native people, but their explanation is that it was two letters and then mud got mixed in and it created this dinosaur shape.
Wow. That feels like a bit of a walk there to get to that one.
Yeah, and there's a
bit of a trot there.
They have this photo
slightly winded.
They have this photo where they show what they say is like the original, and then they outline the mud and like a different thing. And so this is like somewhat plausible, but it's also weird that when you look at it, I don't know how they tell like what's the mud and what's the drawing, because they admit that it's a drawing. So it's like, how do you tell which one's which?
That looks like one solid piece of something.
Right.
All right.
So
the more convincing one is a fake. All right, that's the takeaway from that.
We don't know that. All right, so let's go on. It's gonna get more convincing as we go. This is the way.
Wait, okay, no, you've got a picture here of like what it would look like, or what they're saying it could look like as mud or whatever.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, yeah.
I didn't see that one yet.
Yeah, that image. Yeah, if you go down, so this image basically shows on the left what we see, and then on the right you show what they say. The dark is what they say was the real drawing, and then the lighter gray is what they say is like the mud that makes it look like a dinosaur.
I don't know. I know you probably don't have this, but I would be curious: is the rest of the wall letters like this right there, or these are just two letters and a bunch of pictures of animals?
It's a spread out site. I actually did kind of look at it in a way. This is not part of a larger writing though.
Okay, so it's just kind of off on its own.
Yeah.
It's either a weird couple letters or a dinosaur.
Yep, yeah. It's one of the two. Yeah, all right.
I mean, the that it's letters thing seems kind of unlikely to me here. This seems more likely that somebody drew a dinosaur.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll keep getting better here. So,
okay.
And it's not all pictures, people listening on iTunes. We got a lot more coming. So I want to show you next one from Ontario, Canada. And this is what is labeled as a Stegosaurus by Lake Superior. And you can see a boat basically full of people and a two-legged animal with spikes all up and down its back.
Yeah, the scaling here is a little concerning, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a very large animal.
Massively bigger than this boat?
It's like
the size. What we take away from here?
It's at least the size of a canoe.
And maybe it's the red paint. It just looks like a devil dinosaur or something. It's got like a weird goat head thing going on with the horns.
Yeah, it's really freaky. And this again, what mythology, whatever. Here's the one that got me, Patrick. Here's number 4. Here's the one that got me going, okay, maybe this is a show. This is from northern Peru on a rock wall. Same red paint as the one discovered in Colombia. This is actually a very similar site that I guess we haven't heard of because it's old news. This is another brachiosaurus or sauropod. And this one you cannot tell me is random mud because 1, it's done in paint. And 2, it's surrounded by people with hunting spears for scale.
Yeah, again, like the brachiosaurus, brontosaurus, whatever.
Right, it's got the big body, stubby legs.
With little stick figures with what I would describe as carrying spears. Some
Yes,
of
they
them are
have.
carrying shorter things. Some of them have two things in their hand, but they're like people, and they're all circled around this thing.
They're all circled around it with their spears. One guy's actually drawing his spear back,
Yeah.
and this dinosaur. And this is just the undisputed stuff. So this thing's got this long neck. It's a
And they
little
say
bitty
this might be
head.
mud.
No, no, no. I'm just saying. Tell me this.
Oh, okay.
This is from the other one.
I was about
This
to write a really heated email, Dennis.
no. This is clearly paint. Clearly, you can see the outlines of people, and then they're all hunting what is some creature with a giant long neck, big thick body. Um, so the author notes that many of these seem to be preserved, like these in Peru, and this is actually interestingly enough where they found this cave painting of what appears to be people hunting a brachiopod is next to dinosaur tracks
Hmm.
in a state park called the Dinosaur Tracks Carupa. I don't know. I don't speak Spanish. So,
Oh, I love it
as
when
is our
somebody
tradition.
besides me has problems pronouncing words, and that's mainly you, Dennis. That's
But I Googled it. I went and looked this up. I might not be able to say it, but this is like a sanctioned government park in Peru. And they have
Garupa.
they have these paintings
That's my go at it.
pretty much alongside footprints of dinosaurs that have been certified as dinosaur footprints. So
Certified dinosaur prints.
this is in Apollo, Peru. They still do walking tours there. I was like, maybe I could book a trip. I don't think they're doing it right now because of the whole mess we're in. But I've included pictures of the actual dinosaur prints here. You could just scroll through.
Oh, are you thinking about a road trip for Cryptic Accounts, Dennis? Are we gonna
maybe go see some dinosaur stuff? I don't think we have to go to Peru though. I think there's a lot of these in like Arizona too.
Oh yeah, this is in Peru. I did forget about that for a second.
But these are essentially large dinosaur footprints, and of course, these could be older than the cave drawings, but it is interesting that they're in such close proximity.
Also, that they've been maintained, like that there's still a thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always wondered that about dinosaurs. You think of the world. The world must be a lot bigger than we think of it as. Otherwise, you think somebody would have walked over this stuff by now, or like dug a hole there, or like try to dig a well. Like the world's just so huge that we can still find preserved footprints from
Well, it's
65
not even
million
just
years ago.
humans, that just other animals haven't trafficked this area so much that this has been that rain hasn't made it deteriorate. There's just so many different things that like you would think would make something like this go away.
Right, but it's there, and as comparison, I compared it to other footprints from Arizona, from Tuba, Arizona. They're dinosaur prints, and those specific ones are, they think, T-Rexes.
Oh,
We're stomping through there. So that would have been from a theropod, like a T-Rex or an Allosaurus. Like I said, it's the proximity that interests me. But Patrick, I said we get more and more convincing as we go. If primitive cave drawings are not enough for you, let's move on to something in more recent history. I want you to take a look at the stone carving that I've included.
whoa.
Yeah.
It's like a dinosaur seal. That looks like not Triceratops, but something of that. I don't know what dinosaur that is.
It looks to be a Stegosaurus. So I'll describe it for the listeners. So that it's something like a rhino type creature, but it has, or actually Triceratops actually. It's something like a rhino type creature, but it has 5 plates on its back, and then it's got like a head helmet. And we know exactly where this came from and who commissioned it. So this stone carving of what appears to be a Stegosaurus or Triceratops was commissioned in an Angkor temple in Cambodia, and it was built by the epic builder King Jayavarman VII in the late 1100s. So that's the Middle Ages. That's like when Islam was around. So we're getting closer to modern history, and people are still carving these things, and they're looking better and better. So this temple would have been built in an area that now is engulfed in jungle vegetation, so like in a rainforest, and it pretty much remains there today. So at the time, a number of Hindu and Buddhist kings ruled the area, and this particular temple has been chosen to remain in its natural state due to its historic value. and it's full of various carvings of peoples, gods, plants, and of course this dinosaur. And this has been studied by academics. So you might think, okay, well, maybe this is some like mystical creature or something in Hinduism. But this is actually, this temple as a whole has been studied by academics, including Claude Jacques and Michael Freeman, who are both professors who have studied Angkor for now over 30 years. These scholars are expert in Sanskrit and the cultures of the time period in Southeast Asia. They published many books on the region's history and art. They're not conspiracy theorists. These authors view this particular carving as authentic with no hint of forgery found in it or anywhere around it. They have immense knowledge of Hinduism and Buddhism. And when they saw it, they said, yep, that's a stegosaurus. It's the only thing they could compare it to. So maybe something was stomping around out there in the rainforest.
Maybe. I mean, that would make sense that something that we're pretty sure was like an herbivore would have thrived in a place like the rainforest and been able to survive.
Right. Yeah.
Huh.
Okay. So we'll keep moving on. Now we'll get to the story, and I went on my own little tangent here, of a man named Waldemar Julsrud. And he was a German immigrant and an archaeologist who came to the Americas in 1945. We're not going to discuss his history. Actually, just to be fair to this guy and his family, nothing I could find said he was a Nazi. Nothing said he was... He was one of the people who lived there during that time and moved over here because stuff wasn't too great. So he was an archaeologist though. So while he was working in Mexico, Jules Rudd uncovered over 33,000 ceramic figurines in the area of El Toro, near the Chiva Mountains, which are nearby. And these figurines date from around 800 BC to 200 AD. So I've included a couple here. One looks like the Loch Ness Monster.
It really does. That's Nessie.
Yeah, and he's got these little plates on his back. And the other ones look like sauropods or long necks, like we were describing. One is kind of like on his back. Forelegs. Another one's rear and back. And this is kind of the tip of the iceberg. We'll get to my favorite here in a minute. But these have like obviously been hotly contested because it's just a straight up modern discovery of something that's a lot better than those cave drawings. And most mainstream archaeologists will say, basically because they have to, that they have to be a hoax. And the only thing I could find, I look up articles about it, and you know the number one reason why mainstream archaeology says it's a hoax?
Why?
It's not carbon dating. It's not because dinosaurs died.
Oh, but
this can't be dinosaurs because dinosaurs died. We know dinosaurs died 65 million years ago. And some of this stuff, as you'll see, we've actually done like dating and stuff, and it dates to like a few thousand years ago. And they'll be like, well, it's a hoax because dinosaurs died. It's basically what they'll say.
Okay, so no follow-up questions, no investigation, just, well, that doesn't go with what I already thought, so it's not right.
Oh, they'll try. So these are known as the, if you want to Google them, the Acambaro figures. It's Acambaro. And from what I can tell, basically the debate, the reason the debate rages is one, the whole, it just doesn't fit in the paradigm. But as we've seen in archaeology, that happens all the time, and sometimes even against scientific evidence, like in our Egypt show. And two, the guy who unearthed them, this German fellow, happened to be a young Earth creationist, which wasn't too uncommon at the time, and still isn't like super uncommon today, but that was his belief. So therefore, he must be lying. He must be making up dinosaur figurines because we know he believes the dinosaurs walked with people.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a bit of character assassination. I mean, it's not nothing, but it's kind of like saying, oh, the guy we disagree with found something that agrees with him, therefore it has to be fake. There's not a lot more to the idea that it was fake. Some people since the discovery of these have been duped by local villagers that will try to make copies of them or trying to make stuff. But when attempting to scientifically test some of these dinosaur sculptures' datings, it was actually first found out through what's called thermoluminescence dating, because these are potteries. I guess they do something with the heat that it would take to make the pottery, that these are from 2500 BC.
Okay.
So about 5,000 years old. So that's unacceptable to the mainstream. So they weren't going to roll over so easy. And they've done further testing, and they've never been able to date these things to the current age. They basically just threw up their hands and say, you know what? We just can't tell what date they're from.
Mm.
But they look, I think one person said they look like too good to be that old, so they have to be from the modern age. And here we see a guy riding a riding a Triceratops,
which
one of
is,
them.
I mean, let's be honest. I would want to know how to like figure out how to ride one of those. That would be amazing.
That would be
Can you
incredible.
imagine going into battle on a Triceratops?
Oh, you take over the world.
I mean,
elephants were terrifying to people back then. Like, imagine a Triceratops.
yeah.
You'd have nothing, and they're armored.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So when is this one from?
I don't know when this particular one is from, but in general, these were thought to be dated from, I think I said 800 to 200. But then they dated one from 2500. So, but keep in mind the cultures had been there since around the end of the Ice Age. So if they say they can't date it, it could just as equally be 10,000 years old as made yesterday. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know on these. And so this is actually very common to a story that I had stumbled on maybe a few months ago and shared with you, called the Ica Stones. And I had found those in research of like early contact with UFOs. These are very famous. So the Ica Stones are a collection of between 11,000 and 15,000 stones collected by Dr. Xavier Cabrera and other explorers in Peru. They are kept either in Dr. Cabrera's private museum, as well as numerous, I counted at least 5 museums throughout South America. So these were made from river boulders that were anywhere from 20 grams, which is like a stone you'd hold in your hand, to 500 kilograms, which is a couple tons.
It's pretty big.
Yeah, a ton or two.
It's like a boulder.
They include low relief engraved images, which are consistent with the primitive technology and carvings that happened at the time. One thing that keeps striking me is, okay, this guy found 15,000 stones. Okay, you tell me he's sitting out in the desert carving 15,000 stones. How long would that take you to fake?
I mean, that's a commitment to a con right there. Like 15,000. Like if you were gonna fake it, like you think you maybe 50, maybe 50,
maybe a couple hundred if you were. And he's carving stone. And we'll get into like what technology they think was used to do it. But this is not like you just grab a rock and paint some paint on it. Like, this is carved. So somebody carved in the span of like a decade or two, 15,000 stones. And this is one of the big reasons why people say, okay, not all of these can be fake, because that's a lot. Like,
that is a lot.
Try to count to 15,000. I mean, it'll take you like, so, and it's done on giant boulders, small boulders. Now, of course, these are, again, they have to be hoaxes, but these stones are actually mentioned as far back as 1613 AD in the historic record by Spanish explorer Santa Cruz, who said in his travel reports that, quote, during the governance of Pacuti Inca Japanca in the 1400s, in this region where Ica province is situated today, a great number of stones with engravings have been revealed. And let's get into some of these stones. So,
whoa.
There is a guy riding a Triceratops, and we'll get into why this one is one of the more authentic ones. There is a guy riding what appears to be some sort of phoenix or raptor type thing. Now, the Triceratops looks like a Triceratops. This thing has two horns out its head, one horn out its nose, its plate. It has its back plates, and it has this circle. I want you to notice on its belly, it has this circle. which is actually common throughout these drawings and ends up being a piece of evidence later. And so we just keep going. We got a guy riding a Triceratops. We got what appears to be some sort of like like those duck-billed dinosaur things eating a fish.
Yeah. Oh, I thought it looked more like a bird. The like yellowish one.
Oh yeah, he's eating. Yeah, but it's one of those duckbill ones. He's got the spikes on the end of his tail. You got, or maybe he's some sort of Allosaurus or Tyrannosaurus, which they found the footprints. This is in, around that area.
These are
so
weird.
They are very weird. And then we have what appears to be like one of those near water duck-billed ones with 3 plates on its back. And the duckbill thing that you learn about, and it's got its upper head flap thing that you see in dinosaur books that these people that long ago wouldn't have known about unless they saw it. And again, notice on a lot of these, they draw these circles on certain areas, on the legs, on the tail. They draw these circle patterns. So it's important to note that some of these, not the ones I've presented here, have been found to be forgeries, but the author notes that, of course, that's going to happen, especially in an economically depressed village, and that's like not necessarily uncommon. There's tons of forgeries of like ancient Egyptian artifacts, et cetera, but there are a number of strange details we'll go through that make some of these dinosaur ones eerily authentic.
Yeah, these are really detailed. There's a lot of work involved in them. Like this isn't.
Yeah,
this
these
would
are
take
not
a lot of people a lot of time to do.
Yeah, 15,000 of these.
That's a lot. And if some of them are humongous.
Yeah, and some of them you can see pretty much how big they are. Like some of them look as big as a basketball. Some of them look like they're zooming in, so maybe it's hand drawn. But even the ones that are small have amazing detail. They do all the scales. This is a monumental like stoneworking task. So assuming this was a big forgery in the 20th century, it could have only started in 1945. I mean, just do the math. It would take like 100 years to do this, and we haven't even lived that long since these were discovered. So here's some of the reasons why many scholars actually do think they're authentic. So one, outside of the 1600s reference, 2 Jesuit missionaries also mention these in the 1535 and 1562. Now they didn't have words for dinosaurs back then, but they mentioned the stones. Some of these have actually been discovered for the first time with eyewitnesses. So, for instance, in tombs dating between 500 BC and 1000 AD, they have unearthed tombs that they knew existed through like radio waves and stuff, kind of like they do in the pyramids.
Yeah, they're like, pockets or whatever.
And some of these have been surrounded by as many. For instance, there was one in the Rio Grande Palpa region that was dated between 400 to 700 BC, and 30 scholars and eyewitnesses who were there the first time they opened it, and they found these stones. So unless somebody got there first and snuck in and hit all these stones. Next is the fact that archaeologists who study these stones with dinosaurs on them find that there's a thin layer of what's called patina. And that is basically when you see these ancient carvings, sometimes they'll be shiny. And that is actually a thin layer of metal that they use to decorate it. So, for instance, some of these that look kind of bright, like they have kind of that gold sheen, that is basically what would have happened is somebody would spend a long time carving the stone, and then they would have basically put metal in it to keep the drawing shiny and visible and all that stuff. Because otherwise you just have like black on black on like a rock.
Yeah. And
that's something that would have been that's something that's very consistent with that time period. It would be hard to do now. A microscopic analysis of the stones show that no saw blades or rotary tools were used. So again, assuming this is a hoax, somebody sat around and made 15,000 rocks using a chisel by hand, and then melted down metal and made this. Okay. We are basically able also to identify which ones show a high degree of detail and unified weathering, which is not a complicated science, which is important to distinguish the modern forgeries from ancient ones. So while there are some forgeries, for instance, the work mentions that it's kind of easy to tell. Because you can tell when something's old, kind of like when you find old paper. You can tell if it's just been aged artificially or if it's old. Like archaeologists can basically do the same with rock. And they could say, okay, well, this has obviously experienced like 800 years of weathering and water and stuff, and it's consistent throughout the whole thing. Like it even shows in the carvings, and the majority of those have that consistent stuff, which is how they tell the fakes from the real ones. Now, at least 12 of these with dinosaurs have been accepted by museums for these reasons as authentic, and all of them date from the year 700 to about 900 mostly. So all in the previous thing. Next, paleontologists who have examined the stones have actually found that the scaling on some of the dinosaurs is dead on to what only recent discoveries in the 1990s, when we started finding fossilized dinosaur skin, show. So namely, remember how I kept telling you to look at those circles on like the joint areas, like the legs and the tail? So we found out that dinosaur scaling actually had that on it.
Oh.
And nobody expected that until the 1990s. Because the scaling would have allowed them greater movement because they're so big and the scaling was so
they would have likely been circular.
It would have looked more circular than the rest of the pattern.
I mean, that makes sense. It's from like a mobility, like if something's like evolving or whatever, that makes sense.
Right. And so they would have no way to know that.
So it's flexible in all directions.
Exactly. That's why it looks like that. So it might not be an exact circle.
Box skin.
Nobody wants box skin. But
nobody wants box skin.
Basically, they knew to do rectangular scaling, and even to the point of membranes on the pterodactyls. But they also knew to do the more circular on the joint areas, which we did not expect to find until way after these were even discovered in the 20th century. So even if these were somehow made in the 20th century, which I find very unlikely, it's very strange they got that detail correct.
Yeah.
Now, further, these keep being found, despite the fact that that dude's dead. And experts actually expect at the rate they're finding them that we'll probably find 200,000 more of these before it's all over.
Children now, just somewhere in an undisclosed location, just chiseling rocks.
I think they're just saying
day and night, pouring gold into it, just over.
Right. Exactly.
They got cousins that go hide them. It's a whole family thing. How do they make money? It doesn't make sense.
Right. So this is either one of the biggest human stone carving endeavors like ever, or that's all been happening recently and nobody knows who's doing it or whatever, or these are just exactly what they appear to be, which is ancient drawings of dinosaurs. So far, we've dealt with visual representations, many of which from cultures that didn't have known writing, at least that we have access to today. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to turn to some cultures that do have writing. So I mainly skipped over this because this could be its whole other episode, but as we know, like dragons are basically like very oddly ubiquitous. So like lots of different cultures have like a griffin or, but like dragons are everywhere, which is one weird thing. The Egyptians knew the biblical behemoth as its own name, Peimu, and the Leviathan as Lotan. And these like dinosaur-like creatures were described also by the Babylonians and the Sumerians, as well as the biblical authors. But I want to hop ahead because dragons could be its own thing. I started reading about England, land of St. George the Dragon Slayer, basically. And I found out something very interesting that I never knew about dragons. When you think about dragons, you normally think of it as a dragon. It's a mythical creature, and it's like, it's a dragon, right? But it turns out that the ancient texts actually define them as multiple different species.
Okay.
Which I never thought of. So the early Britons in around 336 BC describe actually the king of what is now Wales as being eaten by one that they called the Balua. And there are some stone engravings. It's actually the one on the right that looks like...
Who got eaten by a dragon? What happened?
King.
You're going too fast. Slow down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
You got Game of Thrones happening. You're just like whisking by it like it's no big deal.
All
What
right,
is happening?
we're going to Britain, what's now Wales, 336 BC.
Okay,
All right.
336 BC. Okay.
So 300 years before Christ.
Okay.
King Morid is described by historians as being eaten by a giant reptilian beast called the Balua.
Whoa. Does it say whether it
And
like flew in? Like, is what's going on?
this one had legs, and in fact, there's an engraving I found of it. It's the one on the right that looks
So this could be
sort
like a
of.
humongous Komodo dragon or something.
It looks like a humongous Komodo dragon, and notice
Okay.
how it doesn't look like the classic dragon. There's no wings. There's no. It's just a giant, what we would describe today as a dinosaur. Now, that's one breed, the Balua. And this really struck me because I always think of dragons as dragons. But if you think of them as different species, that starts to make you wonder more, what are people actually seeing?
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because you don't have different species of griffins or different species of, you know what I mean? Most mythical creatures are what they are. The Minotaur is what it is, but dragons seem to be different things. So, for instance, a few years later, around 306 to 296 BC, so that'd be about 30 years later, one of his offspring, the heir Ifrag, was said to go out and kill one of these things. But he did not kill the Balua. He killed what's called an Andonk. And this is also pictured here as a more skinny, kind of taller version of the same reptile. And in another Welsh location, there was another breed known as the Carrog. So there seems to be an uncharacteristic variety of these reptilian species, which is not really one unified dragon myth. It kind of became that after the fact. And
it became like a general term.
Right. It became a general term when back in the day, they wouldn't refer to every dragon as the same. They would look different than other dragons and they'd have different names.
Well, it had a lot more probably emotional attachment to it because this was the thing that like raided your village or like killed your sheep or whatever. Like it was that one big green thing that showed up every time.
Right. Oh, no, it's that thing again. And they would be. I mean, it's not like,
You go a couple hundred miles the other way and you run into a different one that looks different.
Right. And you're like, oh, no, it's the Carrog.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think
rejoiced when the Adonk was killed. They were really happy about it.
Oh, it'd be terrible. Imagine if there was like a family of like 6 stegosauruses like in the woods outside your house. It'd be the worst thing ever.
Well, I'd never go to the woods, first of all. Yeah, never going
exactly. To the woods. It'd be awful. And do you want to guess when the last Adonk was said to be killed in history in Britain?
It's probably going to be sooner than I'm going to feel comfortable with.
1693.
Yep,
we were already in America. This was after.
I'm not comfortable with that at all.
No, and that one's okay. So that was the last one described to be killed in history. Now, even more recently, in the 20th century, in a remote area, what is now called Cowbridge in Wales, there's an ancient castle there called Penllyn, and this is an area surrounding the Penllyn Castle. This area for centuries has had a reputation for basically housing pterodactyls.
Really?
They call them winged serpents that were a small colony, and they lived there for a while, and they would occasionally come out to like terrorize town folks. And yeah, go ahead.
How long ago was this happening?
So it's been around a few centuries, but there's actually people in the 20th century that lived into this century that would tell stories from their childhood of these things occasionally coming out and the town like freaking out and like killing them. And in fact, the
town would freak out and kill them?
People would. There's this lady named Marie Trevelyan who lived in the Penllyn Castle area, and she's on record as saying like, this is not a fairy tale. I've seen these with my own eyes. They were probably killed in my early life. They were fewer than in old days, and they would kill cattle. They would mess with people, and eventually the human beings just got so populous that we eventually wiped them out.
Just like guns by that point too. If we're talking about the 1800s and stuff, there's guns at that point too.
Right, yeah. We just, like other endangered species, we eventually wiped the pterodactyls out of
Well, yeah, we
whales.
figured out how to kill them.
Yeah,
That's
because they
one
were,
thing humans are great at, killing everything.
and it's interesting because these are all melted in when you hear the stories from around this period of dragon stuff. These are all melted into dragon tails, but what she
Mm.
describes are not dragons. They're
No, they're pterodactyls.
they're pterodactyls. They're significantly smaller. She describes them having these scales that would be like almost rainbow-like and would glisten in the sun. And she believes that they basically just got killed off because when they would appear in her childhood, like the town would just unite to like be like, okay, we're done with this. Like we're killing this thing before it
Simpler
kills
times, just uniting over killing the town's pterodactyl
the
problem. I mean, just
pterodactyls.
bringing people together over just extinguishing dinosaurs.
We got to wipe out these dinosaurs.
You gotta
Man.
kind of love it a little bit.
You kind of do. That
We had
would
a
be fun
big
to
party
see.
afterwards, I'm sure. Like everybody was super friendly. Like crime dropped to an all-time low during those periods.
Oh, I'm sure
I
there
would
would be
put money on.
in a town with a dinosaur problem. There'd be no crime. It'd be like, whose side are you on, man? It'd be like after 9/11, but 9/11 would be all the time, and it would be dinosaurs.
Yeah, I mean everybody's just There's that one guy that's like on the dinosaurs side, but this is a time in history where they just kill that guy, and then we don't really hear about him.
Yeah, he's like, hey, save these. These are endangered species. They're like, we've never heard that term, and these things are ugly, and they kill our goats, and you gotta.
What I'm hearing is you want us to kill you too.
Yeah, you're on the dinosaur side, exactly. You're either with us or against us. So now at this point, I'm in a full-on rabbit hole, Patrick. I started getting into modern American sightings.
Wait, what?
I started getting into modern. I might even do a follow-up one on just like modern stuff. But there's actually a famous photo of what appears to be Civil War soldiers, and nobody can tell you where this came from. It's basically hotly contested. It doesn't look photoshopped. At worst, it's some kind of like really highly accurate, like not computerized, but like classic prank. They used all real technologies and stuff. And so if you scroll down here, I've included a photo. If you just type in Civil War pterodactyl, you'll find it, of some Civil War soldiers who appear to have killed a pterodactyl.
That looks like a pterodactyl. I don't know what else you would describe there. It's got like long wingspan. Like there's 6 dudes stretched out across this thing, and there's space in between them. Like they've got room to like social distance here.
Yeah, and this is hard to identify. Nobody knows where this came from. All they know is an old picture. So we knew dinosaurs existed at this time. So the best explanation is that some soldiers or people who were ex-soldiers shortly after the war created a hoax pterodactyl photo. is basically the
To
story.
what end, though? I mean,
that's the
after
question.
the Civil War, like, what do you gain from that? I'm more confused now as how have we not heard about some sort of road show of these soldiers taking this around to different towns? Because that was a big thing back then. Like dead bodies got carted around and gone on tours. Like if you were famous and you died, they would cart you around so everybody could see you.
Correct. And that's probably all.
It was a very boring world before television and radio. Like nobody had anything to look at, and so everything was interesting.
Oh yeah, like the Yeti finger and stuff that had been. Yeah. And that's almost maybe
just kidnapping people from other countries and then taking them around and showing them. We just like to show things. Anything we can get our hands on.
We do like to show people. But keep in mind, though, let's say this was taken after a battle. Maybe they didn't have time.
I guess.
Maybe this thing fell out of the sky. Maybe they found a carcass and it was gross and they didn't want to cart it with them while they go to the next battle. I mean, who knows?
If I know anything about pre-germ people, it's that they were not grossed out by a whole lot.
No, that's... They are. I love that pre-germ people. They really were pre-germ people.
The pre-germ people. Those are pre-germ people in that picture. They have no idea that there's bacteria on that thing.
No, they're just like, ooh, gross. There's a number of these. I included one of some hunters from this one incident in the 50s who claimed to have shot one. And again,
that is terrifying.
Yeah, your question, and it's when you get into America, like everything else, it's like, okay, well, now it's starting to seem a little more fake. But I don't know.
Where does this photo? Do we have any like background on this photo?
A lot of
This
these are just photos that ended up just circulating. They're just circulated. They're
really?
old. These are the two I found that are actually old. So they're a hoax of some kind if they're not real. Well, that would be the same as if they're new.
I mean, these dudes all look very proud in this thing.
One thing I found interesting about the 1950s pterodactyl photo is that it does appear to have like some feathers and stuff, which I think we only found out very recently that dinosaurs actually had feathers.
Yeah, that was I remember that. It's been in the last. It's been pretty recent.
So there's a couple. That's the best I can do. But then
that last one, this black and white one with it, the dudes in the flannels standing in front of it with their rifles and stuff. Like I can especially after seeing that and then looking back up at the Civil War one, that looks like the same type of thing. Like size wise and everything, like based on the way they're spanned out across it.
It does. It looks like the same width.
The Civil War one looks a little bit bigger. There's more space, but I think there's the same amount of guys in this picture. So the Civil War one, a little bit bigger, but not a ton.
Even like the eye hole looks about the size of a
That's what I mean. That head shape though looks. I mean, it's obviously more detailed than the more recent one, but that shape in the Civil War one looks very similar. Almost like if I was going to guess, like this is a male one in the Civil War one, and this is a female one in the more recent one.
I get that vibe too. We're sexist, but I get that vibe too.
That's just the thing with animals, though. Like, I don't think that's sexist. I don't know why you're attacking me right now.
I'm sorry, that was unfair. I was just trying to.
I'm like, that's just a normal thing.
I was joshing you, bro. So
I was really using cats and dogs as an example in my head, and I didn't really go any further than that. So that might not be true. But like lions, I guess those are cats too.
Most male animals are bigger than female. Yeah, I know. I that was inappropriate.
I feel bad then. It's like I'm being sexist somehow. And I didn't
no, you're not. Don't feel bad. Okay, so I was like, at this point, I'm like, okay, we live in the age of Photoshop. I need witness encounters.
Yeah.
So I discovered a man named Jonathan.
Wait, did you find one of the dudes in this picture?
Oh man, you always set the bar higher with your questions.
I'm sorry, you do it to me too. There's always one thing.
I know.
I know. Man, I should have thought of that and to look that up. You're right.
It's like, oh, here's this amazing picture of UFO. Oh, you did a 2-hour interview with him? Okay, all right. Well, So no, what I did have though is I discovered basically a treasure trove of what I'll call modern pterodactyl sightings.
Okay.
And these come from Jonathan Whitcomb, who's an American cryptozoologist. He's been keeping records of modern pterosaur sightings for about the last decade. So
that's a hobby.
Yeah, and he started kind of hitting it big. He's written numerous books, but like around 2018, 2020, he started hitting it big. And he's got, I don't know, maybe 33 to 40 sightings. One of them that I found was interesting was he lives around the North Carolina area. So I guess there's a hive of these things around North Carolina.
Oh, we can do this when we go to the caves.
Yeah. Dude, isn't it weird? Okay.
Different states, but I mean, that's on the way.
This might be tipping my hat as far as my future research, but I keep thinking, what if these dinosaurs aren't like fully physical?
Oh, are we bringing in like a demon element, like another dimension thing?
I'm thinking like time or dimension. So like, remember those
pockets?
Yeah, remember those tracks I showed you that were like 3-toed earlier?
I do remember those, yes.
Those are really commonly reported around like Mothman sightings, around another entity we'll get into here in a minute. They're the 3-toed.
So much fun, and you're about to freak me out, aren't you?
The 3-toed thing is like a thing that keeps happening around like these like big Mothman type entities, and so there might be maybe they're seeing giant pterodactyls. I don't know, or maybe
maybe Mothman's a giant pterodactyl.
Maybe,
or maybe some variation of that. Back when men used to play with pterodactyls.
or vice versa. I mean,
There's the
okay,
angels
so
that came down and laid with women, and then the men started sleeping with pterodactyls. And then we got Mothman.
and there we go. Now we're off to the races. So,
That's right.
I'm gonna give Jonathan Whitcomb his due here. So so the best person I found of his was a person named Lee. I believe I have her name here, but she's a 20-year-old veterinary technician who's reported actually, and maybe this is more for entertainment value, but I couldn't stop reading multiple pterodactyl sightings by this one person.
What I'm hearing is we need to track down Lee and
Yes.
talk to Lee about her pterodactyl experiences.
And I think this might be possible. So the first came when she was standing at a bus stop in North Raleigh.
Did it also come to wait for the bus? Because that would be amazing. Just pterodactyl land. Just,
can you just imagine a pterodactyl in like a trench coat and like an old timey hat, like walking up, like hello?
Did I miss the 6 o'clock?
So she was at a bus stop in North Raleigh. She looked up, saw something cast a huge shadow on the ground. The second sighting came about a month later when a pair of pterosaur-like creatures that did not have crest and lacked feathers, she saw them fly over. So she began to Google search for pterosaur reports and discovered Whitcomb's site. The third sighting came around 2018 in the snow when Lee was taking an Uber ride to work. this woman just sees pterodactyls. We need to find her and find out what it's like to see like 8 pterodactyls. She'll probably like see a pterodactyl while we're interviewing her. She'll be like, it's a pterodactyl.
I'm trying to withhold any judgment right now based on what you're telling me. But unless you're going to tell me that like there's a whole bunch of other people that are in the same area as Lee who also saw pterodactyls, I'm just...
Not all of my episodes are meant to convince you. Some of them are just the funnest stories I find.
Oh, it is fun.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just trying not to make it... I don't know where you're getting ready to go with this, and I don't want to make a judgment of Lee too quickly.
I mean, I'll let you make it. I have my own judgment, but we'll.
I mean, one person regularly seeing pterodactyls, and nobody else is talking about it in the area. It seems it's a little tough to swallow.
But Patrick, you didn't listen to me. In the third one, she was in an Uber.
What did the Uber driver say? Where is the Uber driver in all this?
Well, according to the report, the Uber driver did not see it.
Okay,
because he was driving.
Well, all right, but still, all right.
So
again, also, I don't want to say she didn't.
But also,
go ahead.
Her family saw the pterodactyls.
Oh, okay. See, now you've been holding out other witnesses on me this whole time. Just let me go off on Lee, and you're like, I got these witnesses that he doesn't know about yet. He's gonna look dumb.
I don't know. All I know is it's got to be tough to be Lee. I feel like she needs her voice heard.
So the family came out too?
Her mother and uncle saw one while they were playing outside at their grandma's house.
Is this like happening during the day?
When she was really little, yes.
Really?
The grandma did not believe it, but mom and uncle saw it. Now a man was driving. Here's some other ones. A man was driving on Interstate 540 in Raleigh late in March 2013 when he said he saw a, quote, huge bird looking thing fly across the overpass, maybe 20 to 25 feet in front of his car.
Okay,
at about
this
7
is that
or
other
8
witness I was asking for a minute ago.
Yes, and about 7 or 8 feet off the ground. Well, this Whitcomb has like 30 or 40 witnesses so far. So
I know, but this is the same area, Raleigh. You said North Raleigh was where Lee was at, so they're in the same general vicinity.
He's mostly hangs around North Carolina.
Interesting.
So he reported online. He described it as bat-like in a way, with a long tail with a spade at the end, which would be a pterodactyl.
And that sounds like that picture from just a little bit ago with the dudes in the flannel.
Yep.
That thing looked kind of bat-like, like as far as like coloration or whatever, and just what you would kind of expect, probably what those wings would feel like if you were to touch them. They look batty.
They do, like lizard / birdish, and it's also what we know from the fossil record. Now, two eyewitnesses saw a flying creature, possibly of the same species, in 2007, but on the south side of Brawley. One of the two allegedly reported it to Whitcomb and said the tail and the head shape is what stood out most, and the feet. That's how come I knew it just wasn't a bird. I thought dinosaurs.
I'd like to take a second to apologize to Lee, specifically based on that you brought me two more witnesses from the same area.
Look,
He's sounding less crazy to me now. Now I'm coming around on Lee.
There are probably some pterodactyls in the North Carolina area. So in Durham,
oh dude, we're going pterodactyl hunting. This is happening.
Oh yeah, I love North Carolina. By the way, I visited there as a kid. My dad was based in Camp Lejeune.
What are you boys in town for? We're looking for pterodactyls.
We're looking for pterodactyls. In Durham, another eyewitness saw a pterodactyl in 1993, and years later reported it to Whitcomb. He said they had huge bat-like wings, estimated at 10 to 15 feet. And
okay, that's the same thing. And Durham's also North Carolina, isn't it?
Yeah, this guy's basically based in North Carolina. He has others from throughout the country, but he's locally known.
There are so many pterodactyls happening in North Carolina. He doesn't even have to travel for work. That's the dream right there.
I know. We're doing this nationwide. We haven't seen a darn thing. This guy's like, I want to see pterodactyls. It just happens outside his home. In 2010, another eyewitness told Whitcomb that I was driving home from dropping off a friend at school. When I was almost home, past the Food Lion, this gets very specific.
Everybody knows the Food Lion on Commerce.
I saw something above me in the sky. It looked like a pale greenish white and smooth skinned. It didn't appear to have feathers, and it had the tail with the diamond shape on the end.
Ooh. Well, that looks like a weird. Is this the picture? Is this what he's saying?
That's my next tangent.
Okay, I won't. I peeked.
So that's the guy we got to interview, Jonathan Whitcomb, and his people. We got to interview him at some point about all his.
Sounds like we could just go to North Carolina and we could probably just meet all of these people.
We just go to a bus stop in North Carolina, take an Uber, and you'll see.
Wait for the pterodactyls to show up. Like good investigative journalists. That's how you do it. That's how you do it, baby.
That's how we gonna do it, Cryptic Account style. Then we see a pterodactyl. I'm going to be so disappointed if I spend all this time in my life researching UFOs and then I see a pterodactyl. I'm going to be like, oh man, now I just sound crazy. But
honestly, I'm thinking about that. I'm like, you're right. That is going to be the harder one to sell people. Like, no, you guys, we saw the pterodactyls. Look, just go back to talking about UFOs and government conspiracies and stuff. This is getting really unbelievable. Like,
I would rather be abducted than see a pterodactyl when it came to telling the story.
I think so. Both are going to be very terrifying.
Oh, the experience, I'd much rather see a pterodactyl. But like, if I'm going to tell people and they have to believe me, I would go with almost anything but seeing a pterodactyl.
Well, we're going to do what needs to be done, which is there's going to be a camera rolling like the entire time. Like, that's going to have to happen.
Yeah, we got to get some like eyeglass cameras or something.
I'm not coming back trying to tell anybody I saw a pterodactyl without some good pictures or video or something.
No, I'll probably just keep that to myself.
I'm going to hold the newspaper up. I'm going to put the pterodactyl behind me. I'm going to take a selfie with the thing. I'm not crazy, and then I'm still going to get called crazy.
Now, I'll do this next part fast.
Okay.
But this reminded me of another cryptid that we'll eventually do a full episode on called the Jersey Devil. And that's what the picture is. It looks like a kangaroo, basically, with bat wings.
And very, like, this kangaroo skipped leg day forever. Like, constantly skipping leg day.
Yeah, like bird legs and, like, a forked tail.
Chicken legs with, like, horse hooves.
And this
it's got, like, cloven feet.
And this is from the early 1900s is when this was drawn. So this might be a pterodactyl. But it's called the Jersey Devil. It's a monster with numerous sightings in the Northeast around the turn of the last century. There's a whole legend behind it, but the legend seems to have rose after people actually saw it. It's not one where there was like the boogeyman tale and then people saw the boogeyman. It's one where people are like, I keep seeing this thing. And then they like come up with a legend behind it. The legend is that there was this woman with 12 children and she was too poor, but she had a 13th and then she cursed it and it became this pterodactyl kangaroo looking thing. But
All right.
there are newspaper accounts of this bat-winged giant pterodactyl looking thing, other than the fact that it has what I would call a horse face.
Yeah, it kind of does, or like a llama or something. But then it's kind of got the like like the swirling ram horn thing going on.
But you kind of know how when people draw animals they've never seen before, they use parts from other animals.
Yeah, that kind of looks like. I mean, that definitely looks like what happened.
It looks like
It's like it's like somebody told like a courtroom sketch artist what they thought it looked like, and they just kind of described it as like this part of the body and this part of this thing's body and this thing looks
right.
like this.
So they just drew
and
it
then they just kind of sketched it out, and it's like, well, I mean, you did what I said, but
right, exactly.
It's close.
Billy, if he has George Clooney's nose and this guy's face, yeah, it would end up being. Do
you want to pay me to do another one or not? No, I don't want to pay you to do another one. This one will work. This is the terrifying thing that I saw.
But prior to these legends, okay, so this thing had actually been in numerous newspaper articles. So from the weeks of January 16th to the 23rd, 1909, newspapers published hundreds of claimed encounters with this thing, the Jersey Devil, all over the state. Among the alleged encounters publicized was that it attacked a full trolley car full of witnesses.
And this was like 112 years ago.
Yes, 1909.
Almost exactly 112 years ago.
Yep, almost exactly to this day.
January 16th through the 23rd. Okay.
Police in Bristol, Pennsylvania, actually.
Were there any pictures or anything of this?
Man, it took like 4 minutes to take a picture back then.
I mean, a trolley car got destroyed by a flying thing.
Yeah, let me grab my 100-pound tripod and set it up on this.
Look, they got one of the Civil War guys with a pterodactyl. They didn't get the trolley car
because it's dead, and they can all stand. There's no pictures of contemporary.
Why do you feel like I'm attacking you right now, Dennis? Don't take a long, slow sip right now.
Because I'm doing a dinosaur episode, and I'm reaping what I sowed.
No. So, you've had so many pictures. I wanted a picture of the trolley car.
There's no picture of it. It was all right. Also in Bristol, Pennsylvania, some cops shot at it or whatever. That's a police report. Now, according
to sound defeated now.
Now, according to legend, we're gonna get to my favorite one in a minute.
Okay.
Now, according to legend,
these have all been my favorite. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah, I know it keeps getting weirder and weirder.
It really does.
Now, according to legend, while visiting the Hanover Mill Works to inspect his cannonballs being forged, the Commodore Stephen Decatur sighted a flying creature and fired a cannon draw directly upon it to no effect. This is what gets me thinking this like Jersey Devil, Mothman, pterosaur type Nexus universe going on. Also, witness to this was Joseph Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Man, I've been learning about that family some this week. I won't go off on a huge tangent, but man, they had some weird side stuff going on. One of his brothers married an American, and Napoleon like disowned him.
That's because Napoleon was awesome. That's because he wasn't part of the royalty. Napoleon's one of my favorite historical figures. He was awesome.
He's he's a very interesting guy, and the little bit I heard about his family, I don't think it's going to be on this show, but I'm about to go on a deep dive into some Napoleon stuff.
Maybe eventually. Some of my favorite reading when I was a kid was Napoleon. I loved reading about Napoleon. He has such an interesting life, and he's a self-made man. He came from nothing.
Yeah.
He fired a cannonball into a protest. Okay, so during 1840, the Jersey Devil was blamed for several livestock killings, cattle mutilation, nod there, and similar attacks were reported in 1841, accompanied by tracks and screams.
What do you mean tracks and screams? Like they heard somebody like screaming, getting drug away, and there's like his footprints off through the mud or something?
Livestock screams.
Oh.
If you didn't know that.
Well, yeah.
Also, back then, it was probably the age of law enforcement where hearing a woman go, "Eh," was like evidence. If you heard it off in the distance. We're talking about
the admissible in court to me.
We're talking about the age here where it's like, what did you see? What did you hear? It takes forever to get anywhere.
And there's witches everywhere.
Also, maybe it screamed. Maybe the pterodactyl screamed, or the Jersey Devil.
That's
Maybe
true.
went, ah! Maybe that's what it did. And they're like, it's a scream. Now,
okay.
reading this whole time, we're going to end on this. And I was super excited because you ever watch the show? I swear, and I should have done the research. Did you ever watch In Search of with Leonard Nimoy?
Yes.
Okay. I swore the whole time I was reading this and doing my own research, I was like, when are they going to talk about the African brontosaurus? Because I swear I saw that as a kid on that show. And so I went in search of, where is that dinosaur thing I remember as a kid? Because I remember it being super, even though I'm not some modern dinosaur fanatic, even though I'm online doing a show about it.
Well, this episode may make people think a little bit differently about that.
That's true, yeah. I remember there being a story about a brontosaurus that was pretty credible in the Congo jungle, and I found it. So this is something I remember from my past. The quote-unquote legend is called Mekele Mbembe. It's sometimes called the Congo's Loch Ness Monster, and his name means, the locals named him, it means the one who stops the flow of rivers.
Well, that's terrifying.
It's a Nessie-like dinosaur, sometimes a brachiopod, that lurks or stands in the depths of this Lake Mangwili in Zambia. Basically, he's always pictured as like
that had a B at the start of that lake.
Oh, Bangwili?
That's right.
Say you're going to criticize me about spelling. So, Mekele...
I got to take every opportunity I can because I butcher so many words on this show.
I don't make fun of you. Mekele Mbembe. Okay, now here's the thing. Here's the thing that makes this super interesting. So when you ask the locals, these are pygmy people, okay? They don't have cell phones, they don't have TV, they don't have nothing. These are these primitive people who live out in the jungle. When you ask them to describe Mekele Mbembe, they use their hands to describe something 3 times the size of an elephant with a long neck and a long tail. The head is small and flat, and a pygmy named Edward recounts a story his grandfather told. They told one of these. They found one of these on the edge of the lake, and being opportunists, dead on the edge of the lake, and being opportunists, they ate the meat, and everyone in the village who ate it died.
Well, I go one of 2 ways there. Either they ate like some really old, like rancid meat, not knowing that wasn't what that should look like fresh. But you would think it would still have some sort of a smell.
Now, I'm not sure what I think that might be like a stay away from.
Or if it's like, the other way I was thinking was, you know how like Komodo dragons have like a ton of like poison in their mouth. Like,
right.
Did they accidentally like dislodge the poison gland or whatever and it satiated the meat maybe?
No, that's interesting. Or here's what I find so interesting about this. These are people who live in nature. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to like not know an animal.
That's true too.
They're
what
not...
to do with it as far as like to survive and eat. Like you and me would have some questionable times on like how to cut something up and what to do with it. Like this is how they survive. Like these
are people who hunt and gather in the rainforest for a living. And when they say they see something 3 times the size of an elephant, which they know, so they're not mistaking it for an elephant, they're talking about something 3 times the size of an elephant with a long neck and a long tail. Now,
were they trying to sell rocks of any kind?
No, that's the other thing is they've never profited off this. So this beast has long been part of local legend and was supposedly seen by European explorers in the early part of the 20th century. The German adventurer Paul Gratz called it the Nasonga, a degenerate saurian, which one might well confuse with a crocodile, were it not that it has skin and no scales, and its toes are armed with claws. So he describes it as like a miniature long neck, a miniature brachopod. So like much bigger than an elephant, but like smaller than like big one. You know, like you
Let's
might
say you might
imagine like.
confuse it with a crocodile.
Well, keep in mind this thing keeps submerged in water with its little head.
Well, but also crocodiles can get really. Isn't crocodiles the ones that can get really big? Or is that alligators? I think it's crocodiles that can get really, really big.
I think both can get big, but seawater, like alligators, can get like 30 feet, something like that.
I got them backwards then.
One of them, I don't know. I could be wrong.
Somebody's losing their mind right now listening.
All I know is this guy knows what it is and says you could describe it. You could confuse it with. So he's not seeing a crocodile.
Yeah, no, he's just saying like based on what it looks like, you might think. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
So another German explorer of the period, Ludwig Führer von Stein Zulansnik.
That's a name.
That's
wow.
Quite the name.
You took everybody's name from like the last 3 or 4 generations. Just everybody's in there, both sides of the family.
Just keep piling it on. He described an unnamed animal of a brownish gray color with a smooth skin. Its size is approximately that of an elephant, at least that of a hippopotamus. That is weird to me because those are two very different sized animals, in my opinion. And I've only seen these things at zoos or in person, but a hippopotamus is much smaller than an elephant.
They're pretty big.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like a shorter, stouter version of an elephant, but I mean, they're pretty big. Like an elephant isn't that much longer. It's just got longer legs and a bigger body.
That's true. That's true. So it depends on what he means by the size of.
Also, I think hippopotamus can get really big as well.
But he described this, which neither one has, as having a very long and flexible neck.
Yeah.
Now, former aerospace engineer Regusters held a press conference on his return from a journey there. And his wife insisted that they observed a dinosaur-like creature on several occasions in late October and early November when they were accompanied by officials from Ghana and the Republic of Congo. And that comes from some journeys in the 1980s that we're going to get into. I think I put that a little out of place. But I want to show you a carving now of this thing that was given to some English explorers.
That is just an odd couple there.
Yeah, it kind of. This is a carving of a Matumbo that was made, I think, by the locals, given to some early English explorers. Now, there are some photographs of large footprints that defy easy explanation in the area, as well as numerous eyewitness reports. One of the most famous people that ever explored this area was Dr. Roy Mackal, who was a microbiology professor at the University of Chicago, who reported, and the University of Chicago is a prestigious university, who reported seeing a small sauropod, which is exactly what we're looking for here, is not a giant one, but a small sauropod in the region in 1980. And Marcelin Nagna, a Congolese biologist who was researching wildlife in the Lake Tele region, says that he spotted the elusive creature in 1983. So they say the animal is about 16 foot, has a wide back, a long dinosaur-like neck, and a small head. And I went Googling this, and I found a free 1981 Washington Post article that explains some of the stuff I remember hearing as a kid. So it says, over the past 2 centuries, there have been many reported sightings of this reptile, which the natives say frightened away the hippopotami. Recently, a crocodile expert working near Lake Tele in the Congo photographed a clawed 16-inch footprint, and the natives identified as belonging to this animal. On a recent African trip, McCall, the University of Chicago professor, 36-inch, 3 foot.
Wow. That's a big foot.
That's a big foot. And on his trip, the University of Chicago professor McCall convinced himself of the worthiness of the expedition when he did find a little poll of the natives in the area. He took along pictures of where he did a little poll of the natives of the area. He took along pictures of a variety of different animals. And this is what I remember. So he took along this picture book, including many animals from that section of Africa and some foreign species like the American black bear, panda, etc. He took along an animal book. And in the middle of the animal book, he put a picture of a brontosaurus. The natives readily identified the animals they knew. That's a hippo, that's an elephant. They would say when they didn't know the animals they didn't know, like, I don't know what a grizzly bear is, whatever. When they got to the brontosaurus, they said, that's Matum. They said, that's him.
Again, no reason for these people to lie. No monetary gain here.
I mean, who knows what these people visiting there gave them, but they're not selling things. And I did find a photograph. There's more, but I found this one most interesting because you can kind of see a human foot nearby of what these three-prong footprints look like here at the end. And you can tell, at first I was like, oh, that's not as big. But then when you compare the man's foot towards the end, if you tried to put that in there, that's about 3 or 4 feet. And from what I can tell, this picture was taken during that 1980s expedition, but these footprints, these giant 3-prong footprints in wet mud, which means something's still out there, have been taken for at least the last 200 years.
Like different pictures have been taken over the last 200 years in mud of these type of prints. Is that what you're saying?
Well, obviously not pictures for 200 years, but people have seen these footprints for the last 200 years. Yeah.
I just meant where they're not looking at the same set that we're looking at in this picture. Like it's different ones happening in different places.
No, that's in wet mud. Yeah. Okay. So the Makale Mbimba is what I think is our best probably chance of finding a little sauropod or something like that.
Man, just you're right. So, the world is just bigger than we think it is. Like, how is this stuff still out there just wandering around and more of us don't know about it?
Right. Or even if it's not around like today, or maybe that's like the last one, or maybe the Loch Ness Monster was real up until 1700 or something. Like,
I do think that, yeah.
It seems like they existed longer than we thought they did.
Yeah, and this really does just kind of bolster what I already kind of thought about, for example, the Loch Ness Monster. Like, it just makes it all the more plausible that that was a real thing that was happening at some point.
Yeah, at some point. And then maybe some of these remote regions in the Amazon and Africa and stuff, they still exist. But that's my dinosaur research, Hermano. I know that was fun. Yeah, I know it was a lot, but I'm glad you had fun.
I've enjoyed it. I'm not upset about anything right now. I don't feel like impending doom any more than I did before the show started.
No, if anything, we killed the dinosaurs is what I'm learning.
Big shocker there. Shocker there.
I kind of put it near the beginning because it was where my flow of consciousness was going when I was writing this, but I'm interested to see in that new like Sistine Chapel in Colombia of all that art, hearing that they just scratched the surface is very interesting to me. So I feel like that being around the same time period as the stuff in Peru and Mexico and Utah and all this stuff, that will be a big test to see what we find there. If there's anything in the next year, once the researchers are able to get back together after COVID to see what they find. And I wouldn't be super shocked if they at least, even if these are like mythical beasts and they didn't really exist, it wouldn't be super shocking to see some dinosaur-esque stuff on that big cave.
Yeah.
Whew. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. You got any final dinosaur thoughts, Patrick?
I mean, I feel like I sprinkled my thoughts in pretty liberally throughout the whole episode. But yeah, this is another one of those things, much like the Inner Earth stuff, that it's like, yeah, it sounds crazy until you start looking into it and you're like, oh, this doesn't sound so crazy now.
Right. It's that's why almost all of our episodes you get like you're like a third through and you're like, I'm the same way. I'm like, I don't know. But then you get like a half and you're like, okay, maybe. Then you get to the end and you're like, maybe I'm not convinced, but like there's not nothing there. There's like a lot of dinosaurs running around.
Yeah, there's something going on there that
also
go ahead.
Did you know that we in 2016 discovered fresh dinosaur meat.
What? No?
I almost
Like frozen or something?
now I wish I included this. No, not frozen. They discovered T-Rex like blood vessels and stuff still intact. And they had no explanation for it for a few years. Now they're saying it was the like ironization of it. I might just bring this up next week, but this was a big part of the book I was using as the primary source of this. And I was reading more into science stuff, and I just didn't have enough to put together because there's like immediately people jumped on that and they're like, well, that should not exist if it's 65 million years old, but it does. So for the last 5 or 6 years, scientists have been working on trying to explain like how this can exist. But maybe in a future, maybe I'll have a dinosaur part 2 in like a few months or something. But yeah, we have like dinosaur fresh tissue that we found.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you're gonna have to come back to that at some point, or send me some stuff after we're done.
Okay, I will. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Yes, thank you.
It's season 2. We're going to be bigger and better than ever. Please keep liking. Please keep subscribing. Share. You have been amazing. You've been giving us amazing ideas, and I expect to see some of the ideas that you've given us in this season to become episodes. We have grown more than we thought we would in the last year. We're doing this as a labor of love, and we think it's going to pay off. So keep supporting our cause for truth, basically, and just open minds.
Yeah.
And in a world that seems to be closing off into camps all the time, we just want to explore stuff that is fantastical and awesome, and just just find our own way in this world. So help support this glimmer of hope in a world that's going to tell you aliens are attacking you and none of this other stuff can exist. We are here for you, and as long as we are allowed to exist, we want to keep working for you. So share us now while you can, and share your favorite episodes. Listen to our back catalog. Give us some likes. Give us some comments. We appreciate you. We're looking forward to an awesome season 2, and let's make 2021 amazing.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dennis.
All right. Love you, Patrick.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.